Good afternoon. I'm just coming from Tibetan New Year party, Losang party. So when someone comes from a party, a New Year party, you kind of understand the state of mind, So we drank a lot, ate a lot. Some people believe that because we are Tibetan Buddhists and follower of His Holiness Dalai Lama, that we could be vegetarian and vegan and pure. That's not the case. You name all kinds of meat. It's all there, but I kind of hesitated myself to not consume too much. But I've just ran from heavy lunch, so I'm feeling a bit drowsy or sleepy, And thankfully I didn't drink wine, otherwise I'd be dozing off as well. So I'm not in a situation to deliver a keynote address per se, and I'm a more extempo speaker, but I'll say a few things, and I think there's a Q&A session also you are free to ask. But as I entered, I'm very glad to see some of my old friends whom I've known for 2 decades, I think we met in Columbia University. As I entered, I said, this is the separatist conference, If Chinese embassy issues a press release today and say all the separatists are at Hunter's College, I think they'll get all the key leaders in this room, actually. Maybe our friends from, who led the Tiananmen Square are also supportive of separatist movement, so you're in our gang. How does it, oh, by the way, but you're Han Chinese, right? Yeah. How does it feel to be a minority among minorities? We always want to give, Because we always call quote-unquote minorities, right? We are the 54 minorities, 55 all the time. So whenever I go to a panel discussion with a few more Tibetans than Chinese, I always say, how do you feel today, You are a minority. As you can see, very good to see, actually. All of us are in this room. And the topic is China's threat to global democracy and human values. I think I did not explain much. All our friends and panelists will share their views and convince you beyond doubt. It is indeed true. The biggest challenge before the world is, how can we democratize China? China is the last remaining, of course, not including Cuba and North Korea, but among the larger countries, is the country where democracy is needed. Now, when we say democratization of China, we are not saying because it's good for us, it's good for the world, good for us, particularly it's good for China and Chinese people. That we need to understand. Now, let's take the case of coronavirus. Now, it all started in Wuhan. And we know what happened to the doctors, the whistleblowers, right? They were discouraged, they were shut down, they were penalized, they were told they were rumor mongers, And because of which they tried to control freedom of speech. And then, coronavirus have now spread all over China. And now, rest of the world. It's impacting global security, global economy, and most importantly, China's economy. Because of lack of freedom of speech, who has paid the highest price? Who is losing the most? The Chinese government, China's economy, and Chinese people. Recently we were in Virginia, and we have a major conference in April in Dharamsala. A Tibetan monk was showing us news because he was supposed to come to Dharamsala. I said, are we going ahead with the meeting or not? Because nowadays, because of coronavirus, you cannot have a gathering like this. And he said, look, so many Chinese people, with coronavirus in Himachal Pradesh, including Dharamsala. I checked the news, it's not so. They were not infected. But because they had Chinese passports, because they were tourists in India, the Indian authorities could not take the responsibility or the risk. So they all were told to stay in one hotel room for 1 or 2 weeks to make sure they are not sick. So now, how many millions of Chinese are traveling all over the world? Now you have heard, minor stories to major stories. Minor stories are we all look alike, we all Asians look alike, right? Now, try taking a subway and cover your mouth and start coughing. All the Americans run away, thinking that you have coronavirus. Yes or no? When that happens, how does it feel? How you feel a little unease, no? You just feel, why they have to be scared of us? I mean, it's a bit embarrassing, it's a bit humiliating, it's a bit discriminatory, but at the same time, you experience that. The Chinese people with Chinese passport are actually facing that. When you get off the plane, you have to test. Right? And then you're told to stay, on the sideline. So we feel very bad. Really. All our sympathy goes out to Chinese people who are unnecessarily suffering because of coronavirus. Our heart goes out to them. How many families are separated? How many? Nearly 3,000 people have died. Why? Nearly 80,000 are infected, of which absolute majority are Chinese. We feel so bad. They should not experience this, but they do. Why? Primarily because there is no democracy in China, there is no freedom of speech in China, and because of which one thing led to another, and we are facing the consequences. But Chinese friends and brothers and sisters should also understand that the humiliation or the embarrassment or the discrimination that you feel now for the last few months, we Tibetans and all the splitters here have been experienced for the last 60 years. We are always told by the Chinese government, by Chinese, government officials, say that you are Tibetans. You are a minority. You are backward. You don't know anything. We should show you the path. The party secretary of Tibet Autonomous Region should be Chinese. The chief of the judiciary should be Chinese. Chief of the police should be Chinese. Chief of intelligence should be Chinese. We should lead you. Even at a village, county level, party secretary is Chinese. Even though there is a Tibetan, there is a Uyghur, there is a Mongolian with equal credentials. In fact, better credentials. In their own land, they are told, no, because you are quote-unquote minority, because you are Tibetan, you have to be subordinate to a Han-Chinese officer. That's how we felt. I continue to feel for the last 60 years. Discrimination, humiliation. So in a way, we have full sympathy and understanding of how Chinese people are going through this experience. But you must also understand that actually Tibetans and the people in the audience, many of us have been going through this for the last 60 years. Now this is nothing new. Because of lack of democracy, because of lack of freedom of speech, the coronavirus tragedy has happened. Now we just have to go, not even 2 decades ago, SARS. Same experience. Chinese government discouraged the information, and one thing led to another. Now it became a crisis, global crisis, and people in Hong Kong paid the most price because the second largest mortality was in Hong Kong. Now again, if you go by history, we should learn. Amartya Sen had written an article, later a book, comparing famine in India and famine in China. So according to his analysis, the data, he found that during the famine in West Bengal in India and in China, the storerooms in India had far less grain than China. Chinese government storerooms had far more grain. But because of democracy and freedom of speech, in India, far less people died. Of course, a couple of million people died. But because there was a democracy, because there was freedom of speech, every news media started covering the death and the tragedy. And the politicians and leaders, they felt pressure, so they went and looked wherever they could get any grain possible from any storeroom, and they distributed to the people. And they prevented a major famine. But in China, in contrast, the storeroom had more grain. But then the local officials reported to higher authorities that everything is good. People are happy, people are satisfied, people are content, and more and more and more people died. Millions died. And the grains were lying in the store. Because there was no media to report it. Because there was no freedom of speech, there was no democracy, there was no check and balance. So history has taught us, at least taught China, not just once, famine, SARS, now coronavirus. And ultimately, who pays the price? China. And Chinese people. So that's why even when you walk around, even if you cough a bit, they look at you as though you're untouchable. The Chinese people, you don't have to go through this. We don't have to go through this. So that's why the biggest challenge for us, for the world, is how, when to democratize China. Democratization of China is good for the world and good for China and Chinese people. That we must convey. So you can't come up with this, Asian values argument, cultural relativism. We Asians are so different. West is so different. We cannot adopt democracy like the West. I think that theory is debunked now. And there are so many, from Philippines to Indonesia to Malaysia to Taiwan, so many democracies in Asia make this very clear. The culture is irrelevant. Asian values and Western values, the distinction is artificial. Democracy is universal, and democracy is irreversible. Hence, when Xi Jinping says, socialism is Chinese characteristic, essentially he says socialism with Chinese characteristic in new era. What is the new era? It's the global forum. So Chinese government and Communist Party of China wants to come out with an alternative ideology, alternative system, not just for China. This is good for China. Look at the success we have had. And this is good for the world. That was the proposal. Socialism with Chinese characteristic in new era. That's the Xi Jinping thought. But this is the consequences now. Coronavirus is the byproduct of that thought. Now, based on that theory, Chinese government or the Communist Party of China wants to restructure United Nations, redefine human rights. And this is serious. You might think, how can they restructure, United Nations? Actually, I must give it to Chinese people and Chinese leaders. They are very shrewd. They are very cunning. And they are good at it. For example, in 2017, China received $2 billion of low-interest loan from World Bank. Now, World Bank is supposed to give loans to poor countries with low interest for their development, for their progress. And who was the largest recipient of World Bank loan in 2017? China. $2 billion. China, we all know, China has the largest foreign reserve, anywhere from $3 to $4 or $5 trillion. But they're so good, they convinced the World Bank to give them the largest low-interest loan, $2+ billion. They're good, right? We must acknowledge, we can't be so arrogant, all the separatists here. So, we are right, we are moral here, we are the good ones, they're wrong. They're good. We must acknowledge that. Once you know they're good, then you should strategize as to how best to, beat them, or navigate, counter strategy. Now, they got $2 billion low interest loan. African countries, all these poor countries barely get 50 or 100 or 200 million dollars from World Bank, and they just think they're great, right? And China gets the most. Now, last year, Chinese government donated $200 million, I think around $200 million to the United Nations. And what happened? They became the second largest donor to the United Nations after America. They took over Japan. $2 billion from World Bank, $200 to United Nations, and they are the largest donor. Good, right? Now, $200 million, the way UN functions, all those people who work at UN, I have respect for you, the way they function is very simple. You give money, and then Chinese government is very good, they choose. We give money, it's not a blanket check to United Nations, okay? They choose which agency to give. So they choose agencies, UNHCR, Human Rights Commission, they choose. And then once you give them money, they say, okay, we need to implement this project, and what do you need? Chinese officials in the UN agency. All over. Now the UNHCR, I think it's UNHCR, they organize this UN Youth Forum. They've got leaders from all over the world, like you people in this room. You know? It's a UN Youth Forum, okay? And they all stood up, start singing a song in praise of One Belt, One Road. Now, how does it look? UN-sponsored youth forum. Youth are standing there and singing a song in praise of, One Belt and Road Initiative. And there's a song. It's in YouTube. And it appears that United Nations endorses Belt and Road Initiative, which is Chinese government project, and the whole world is applauding and praising it. And actually, those who actually sang, maybe they were convinced that it's a good project, right? And my friend Dokum Isa is here. You know, the Interpol is an international agency, right, to monitor, to track quote-unquote terrorists and troublemakers. One troublemaker is here. Yeah. And Dokum Isa, my friend, he was issued a red alert. And later, who happens to be the president of Interpol? Deputy Security Minister of China. Now, when you have a Deputy Security Minister of China, who is the president of Interpol, all of us who are split in this room, right? You all a photograph, it's shown live now. We should expect red alert thrown at us, So you will be barred, prevented from traveling to many countries. Fortunately, the president of Interpol was arrested by the Chinese government in China for corruption, and he never came back. To begin with, they appointed like that kind of person, right? See, this is how they, manipulate international system. And this is serious. At the UN Human Rights Council, Chinese government has proposed, and majority of the UN Human Rights Council members have voted in favor of a new definition of human rights. New definition. Development over democracy, food over freedom. Yes? We're talking about democracy and human rights. The way we understand democracy means, of course, among many things, basic definition of democracy has to be freedom of speech and freedom of election. Free election, freedom of speech. These are the basic. Of course, you can have many definitions of human rights. But in any country, this should be the basic. But now, if the UN human rights new definition comes up, they say, well, is the Chinese government giving you good food? Yes. Are they giving you shelter? Yes. Keep quiet now. You got your human rights. Chinese government has fulfilled the criteria of human rights. So what about my freedom of speech? Well, food, shelter, Belt and Road Initiative. And unfortunately, this is the challenge. majority of the countries in the world have voted for that resolution. Not just once, twice. Now, as the UN system works, they want to make the definition into a statute, make those resolutions into a statute. If it becomes a statute, it's binding on all of us. So it doesn't matter how many times we gather here and make noise and talk about democracy and human rights. You go to the United Nations, which is supposed to be impartial and fair, they say, this is the definition. See, this is how they restructure the United Nations. Now we always talk about UN Security Council with the 5 veto power holder, and then no matter what you do, it never reaches to the top. That's given. China has veto power. If none of these splitties will make it to the UN General Assembly. We're not talking about that level. Security Council, forget it. We are talking about a Human Rights Council. This is where human rights discussion ought to happen. If Chinese government succeeds, we won't have the definition. Now, why is that a challenge? As I said, Chinese government is shrewd and effective. And how did they manage to do this? How did they manage to silence human rights discourse in China? Again, it's very simple. 20 plus years ago, we used to be in the streets. Uyghurs, Tibetans, especially Tibetans, we were leading for some time. Now all our friends have joined us. It's good. For 60 years, at least for 30 years, we were all alone. I'm glad people in Hong Kong and Taiwan are with us today. Those that you say, yeah, Tibetans, yeah. Because, I've spent 16 years here. I've met many Taiwanese friends, Hong Kong friends from all over. 30 years when you used to be in the streets, protest, things like that, people from Hong Kong haven't said, yeah, situation in Tibet, I heard, it's not that bad, it's not that good, but we are okay, one country, two system in Hong Kong works, there's a basic law, and one China, two interpretation in Taiwan is okay, So you do your thing, but we will look it from the sideways and then, wave at you, we feel for you, but we go our own way, Thanks for joining our team. Yeah. After 30 years, So what has happened is that 20 years ago, we used to be in the streets, Tibetans. Everyone used to be in the streets. The human rights violation is going on. You arrest 10 people, you shoot 10 or 20 people. We roam the streets of New York or everywhere in the world. And the news media also used to come and cover us. Because news media, they want an action, right? And we used to be there. And the international community, they used to join us too. They validate our argument, Governments also issue statements. Pension lamas, whereabouts, right? Any major human rights event or tragedy happens, Tibet is reported. Then Chinese government, especially China experts, sinologists. Now there are many good sinologists, okay? They are for democracy, they are for human rights. There are many others who say, well, the way you have to deal with China or Chinese government, you have to make them understand is that you must understand Chinese culture, Chinese values, Chinese mindset. Again, this cultural relativism, human values are coming up. If you want to deal with Chinese leaders, for them, their face is so important. If you go to the streets and embarrass them, they get angry, they will not do anything for you. But if you be polite, if you be gentle, if you talk quietly, you can persuade them to improve human rights. They convince all the countries in the world. Say, don't do this. If you issue statements on human rights violation in Tibet, more people will protest out in the streets. So you should take the discourse inside. So hence they had this human rights dialogue now. So instead of governments issuing statements and supporting protests, they all say, all the foreign ministries, they say, okay, now with the Chinese government, we're discussing human rights. Where? In the boardroom, not out in the street. So this human rights dialogue happened. And I've been in my position for 9 years. I've been going round and round. And they always say, we are talking to China on human rights. We are talking about Tibet. Don't worry, we talk to them. This is more effective than the street protests and statements. And after 9 years, I keep going back and I keep meeting the same people and say, how is the dialogue going on? I say, we're still talking. Yeah, we're still talking. But in the case of Tibet, human rights has gotten from bad to worse. Where is your talk leading to? No, we are still talking. And the last few years, what do they say? By the way, we want to talk. We have applied for a date with the Chinese government, and they are issuing us date sometime soon. We are waiting for that date. 20 years ago, you said you will bring Chinese to the room and scold them about human rights, but not publicly, but privately. This will be very effective. Now, Chinese government is saying, no date this year. No date in April because it's April Fool. Only in September. And they wait. Now so many governments are waiting. Months and months, some are years. I met few governments that say, it's been 3 years we haven't had this human rights dialogue. They don't even get a date to talk about human rights, far less improve human rights. In the last 9 years, since I've been in position, situation in Tibet and Xinjiang and Hong Kong has gotten from bad to worse. See, they are good. Chinese government is so persuasive, don't you think? They took the discourse, the public discourse of human rights, to a private discourse. And they did nothing, now they are not talking. And people are applying for dates. And they are waiting. And I have many friends, as how this discussion goes, same old thing. Same monotonous thing, the monologue that we say and same monologue they say, and that's it. And they say, are you interested? No, they don't get excited. And who are these people on the other side from the Chinese government? Western trained Chinese officials. They know human rights jargon. They can recite human rights definition better than you. And they will tell you what human rights is all about. Why I say this is, there is a theory that we must engage with China. We must educate all the Chinese students here. From 100,000 to 150,000, 200,000. Some trained Chinese leaders also, they will go back. And they will climb the leadership ladder. And eventually democracy will come. Why? Most of the Chinese leaders would have been educated in the Western academic world. And they would have changed their brain, or rather washed their brain, or whatever, educated their brain, and they will be like us. 20 years. Socialism with Chinese characteristic is the way to go. We are redefining, restructuring United Nations, redefining human rights. We take most loans from the World Bank, Conditions are imposed on us. Hence, it's the biggest challenge. Yes or no? And the people in Hong Kong felt the pressure. One country, two system, basic law. We signed it, never implemented. Now there's regression. So we should react to it. Then the concept of localism and local assertion, local identity came about. And protest after protest happened for several months. It became headline news. Right? And people in Hong Kong say, yes, we don't want to be like Tibet. We don't want to be like Xinjiang. Yeah, we've been saying that for 60 years. And friends in Taiwan too. We are independent, we are islands, Essentially, we are a country on our own. We have 27 countries recognizing us. We feel for Tibetans, but you're on your own, But then during election, right? Intervention, the pressure. The 2017 local election was in a way, manipulated, to say the least. Because Russia is interfering in America's election, why can't we not assume that China will interfere in Taiwan's election, in Hong Kong, and and Tibet too. So now people in Taiwan are also feeling the pressure. We don't want to be like Tibet, and we're good friends, right? So after 60 years, this is the conclusion. Yes, this is a panel discussion. We all have same issue, same challenges. And even in Columbia University, right? 22 years ago, I used to say, if you close your eyes and listen to all our complaints, 1949, Communist Party came to Beijing, and then human rights violation, cultural revolution, so on and so forth. Right? Just you close your eyes and listen, you just have to replace Uyghur with Tibetans and Mongolians with Uyghur. Almost the narrative is the same. Now recently our friends are joining us, right? Same experience. Now we all have to have a coordinated approach. I don't know whether coalition or not, that's a very formal entity, but coordinated approach with a common strategy. We must go to foreign office after foreign office and tell them this human rights dialogue is not working. 20 years, it's not working. Now don't tell us that we are talking about human rights with Chinese government when you are yet to get even a date to talk about human rights. I think we should say that. And each time you mention your case, you must also mention, by the way, you be a de facto spokesperson for Tibetans and Uyghurs and everybody. Chinese governments are very good. They're very good at divide and rule. Another effective strategy that they deploy is divide and rule. You go to European Union. Europe is very confusing. Europe has around, the larger definition, Europe has around 54 countries or 49 countries. European Union is 28 countries. Then you go to Europe. You try to talk to them. They have formed 16 plus 1 group. Now 17 plus 1. 17 European countries plus China. The European Union, for any foreign policy or human rights matter, you need consensus. But when you have 16 plus 1 or 17 plus 1 coalition, these 17 countries is not going to vote for you. It's going to vote along with Chinese government. And it's true. You go to UN Human Rights Council, whenever there is a resolution. In 1990s, the European Union, or European countries like Norway, Denmark, and others used to be pioneers. They were the leaders in proposing a human rights resolution on China at the Human Rights Council. Now, no. 17 plus 1 countries, 17, most of them will abstain themselves from voting on human rights in China. That's why the new definition of human rights prevails, because many of the European countries, they abstain. And then the third world countries mainly vote with China and they prevail. So divide and rule is Chinese government strategy. Europe is divided. African continent is divided. Asia is divided. Buddhist countries, we should be sympathetic to Tibet, is divided. Muslim countries should be united on Uyghur issue, divided. In the case of our brothers and sisters in Xinjiang, 1 to 2 million people are in detention. But which Arab country, which Muslim country is speaking out? Turkey, partly because they're East Turkestan, they're Turkish race or ethnicity or nationality. And most of the Arab countries keep quiet. In fact, they vote along with China on human rights situation in China, right? Can you imagine that? Why? The Chinese government or the Communist Party of China is very good at divide and rule. So we should be careful. You keep hearing this. Oh, this Tibetan program, our Hong Kong people, we are a bit separate, or Taiwan, But I think we need coordination. Same message. No bilateral human rights dialogue. It has to be multilateral. So we all must ask like-minded countries. Like there's a Religious Freedom Alliance now, American government is leading, and there has to be a human rights, alliance, democracy alliance. So like-minded, we must appeal to them to have a coordinated approach. Whenever there is a resolution in UN Human Rights Council, they all must vote in bloc. If you vote as a single entity or country, you will be reprimanded and you feel the pressure. And we all must approach Human Rights Council and other UN agencies. We must avail ourselves of any international forum to make our case. And of course, you make your statement at the end, do add other brothers and sisters of the separatist group. This is how we must move forward. So hence, I will not take that much of time. But finally, let me end by saying, there is an opportunity now, because in my 9 years, in my position, first 5, even 6 years, wherever I go, Chinese government had almost a monopoly. If you go to the foreign ministry or the members of parliament and even think tanks, even news media, they were scared or they hesitated to cover or speak about Tibet and human rights. Because China's economy is growing very powerful, very influential. In the last 3 years, there's a change now. There's a shift. Because the American government has essentially declared China or the Communist Party of China as a political rival. The reports after reports show China is the biggest challenge for America. The European Union, as I said, they hardly have any consensus because there's 70+1 group and all that. But even the European Union issued a statement saying China is a political rival, economic, what they call systemic competition. So ideologically now, countries are waking up and saying, wow, this is definitely a political rival from ideological sense. Because socialism with Chinese characteristic is not what we want. We want democracy, the universality of democracy to prevail. So this is an opportunity now. Because we have been in this field for the last 60 years. Our voices, our concerns, our complaints are getting validated now. And if you listen to many of the countries' reports, you read the reports, even the State Department or the Defense Department of America or European Union, you just read those paragraphs, it sounds almost like they are, quoting us. But these are exactly same things we've been saying. So there is an opportunity now. This opportunity is not to destroy China, really, not at all. As far as Tibet is concerned, our policy is middle way approach, which is middle of two extreme or two views. We don't seek separation from China. Yeah, some of our friends are, having different views here. This is a very Tibetan Buddhist Dalai Lama's point of view. We must have dialogue. We believe in non-violence. If you believe in non-violence, then you must talk. If you want to talk, then you must understand the other side too. The China's is one China policy. Sovereignty and territorial integrity of China cannot be compromised. Then we say, fine. This is Dalai Lama. The sovereign is Dalai Lama. We say, fine. Let's get to the table. These are your preconditions. We accept. But these are our preconditions. Repression of Tibetans of the end. Then let's come to the middle ground, which is to seek genuine autonomy for the Tibetan people. So our Uyghur and Mongol friends are smiling, giving me a bit of a smirk. They say, good luck to you. They almost say, good luck to you. But this is our approach again, Our approach is, when from Buddhist point of view, is unconditional but conditional in the sense, these are the things Chinese government says. You cannot compromise. Then say, okay, let's get to the middle ground. That's the middle way approach. Because if you believe in non-violence, the dialogue is the only way. Dialogue is the only way, then you must have a basis to talk. And in Sovereign, as Dalai Lama says, we Tibetans are not anti-China. We are pro-justice, pro-democracy, pro-human rights. When we say there ought to be democracy in China, we are saying it's good for you. Not only for us, it's good for you. So our motivation is clear. So sometimes some of our friends don't understand. They are so repressive, they're torturing your people, they're sending them to prison. 154 Tibetans have committed self-immolation. It's such a dire situation. How can you even think like that? Now, we think like that because we have His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Unfortunately, the Chinese government do nothing but vilify him, criticize him, call him names for the last 60 years. And I think just a few days ago, one major magazine, I think spiritual-related magazine, came out with most influential leaders in the world, spiritual leaders in the world. And number one was His Holiness Dalai Lama. Number two was Pope. And down the line, there was Oprah Winfrey also, but you know. But His Holiness number one. Whole world accepts and respects His Holiness as a great spiritual leader, moral leader in the whole world. In this century, only Communist Party of China. They say otherwise. So that's why we know we are right. Because why? Whole world agrees His Holiness Dalai Lama is a great leader, hence our policy, middle way approach, also is a great policy. Now we have SFT and QY, they're organizing conference. They're also saying, yeah, why did we invite this guy to be a keynote speaker? Our views are different. They all are for independence, you know. That they're making me wear this badge. Why did they put the emblem here, you know? But I was proud national executive leader of TYC. I'm very proud of my background. I've been a regional and national leader of Tibetan Youth Congress myself. So when you organize this kind of event, I just feel good. You know, our youth should do more. There should be more activism. There should be more protests. There should be more street events. There should be more panel discussion. If anyone is doing it, if youth, organization, SFT, anyone is doing it, it's good for the cause. It's good for Tibetan people. It's good for separatists, quote-unquote separatists. It's good for China and Chinese people too. You know. Having said that, middle way is our policy, okay? I'm not going to change my mind on that. So, this is how I think we should approach too. You know, non-violently, peacefully, legally. But we must stand up with our head held high. Tell the Chinese government, the Communist Party of China, you're wrong. We are right. Ultimately, the truth will prevail. And now, we have empirical evidence. Coronavirus, SARS, famine, and so on and so forth. Right? Why there were, you know, months and months of street protests in Hong Kong? Because you are denying them democracy and freedom of speech. Why people in Taiwan now, they're asserting their local Taiwanese identity more than Chinese identity is because they're saying, you know, we enjoy our democracy, we like our democracy. We want to have our own freedom and human rights. And this is what our brothers, Mongolian, Uyghur brothers, and Kazakh brothers, all are saying the same thing. So I'm very glad to be here, definitely for the whole world. I'm very glad in the last 3 years, the European countries, America included, are realizing to this fact that yes, China is a big challenge, geologically speaking, and we ought to do something about it. In that context, we will be the leaders, because we know, as I said, how smart, how effective the Chinese government strategy is, because we have faced the brunt of it, right? And we can teach or share our wisdom and be the power of change and bring down the great wall of ignorance with Dalai Lama's middle way approach. Thank you very much.